Hey everybody, welcome to Complete Collection, the show where we're going through my vast and varied music collection, one album at a time. My name is Bryce, otherwise known as Locked Groove, and where we left off last time, we're somewhere in my electronic section. So I've got another amazing stack of wax for us to look at today, and I guess we'll just get right into it. No waiting around, no preamble, nothing like that. And of course, like every episode of Complete Collection, this is completely unscripted. I have no idea where this is about to go other than just generally knowing this collection here. So yeah, like I said, we left off in the electronic section, in particular the A's. We finished up with my Aphex Twin, with my Arca, my Air, and now we are into the Avalanches. This is their seminal debut record, 2001's Since I Left You. The Avalanches are an Australian kind of sample-heavy electronic group, plunderphonics to a certain extent, but certainly they, on this album especially, like to recontextualize existing recordings into a completely new whole. This thing features Frontier Psychiatrist. That's probably the most well-known song off the album, but my favorites include 2 Hearts and 3/4 Time, obviously the title track Since I Left You, and I mean there are a host of other ones. Live at Domino's especially is another great one that I like. Reminds me a lot of Daft Punk in like a very, very endearing way. This is an amazing album. Like I said, seminal debut. It's on this kind of cool blue vinyl. This was a reissue that they put out a number of years ago because this one happened to be quite rare and out of print for a very long time. My buddy actually owns an original copy, which is cool. This one actually has a bit of like semi-controversy to it because that song that I mentioned earlier, Frontier Psychiatrist, they actually had to re-record portions of it because they couldn't secure the rights to, I think it's like an Amos and Andy skit or something like that. I could be wrong about the comedy troupe, but it is some sort of like comedy record. So they had to re-record some of the samples. So I think there are a lot of folks out there that are like, they don't love this version of the record necessarily, but I think it sounds just fine. I particularly like the re-recording of it. It's not quite as iconic as the original. It's not quite as seamless as the original, but I still think it is just fine. Like I said, I love this one a lot. So if you haven't checked it out, you definitely need to do yourself a favor because it's really remarkable. Now, we'll just put this down here. Okay, safely and out of the way. Amazing. We're on to the next record. I've got a complete Avalanches vinyl discography here. This is their debut or their follow-up album, Wildflower. This one was really interesting because the Avalanches, after releasing Since I Left You, didn't release another record for another 16 years. So this one, I believe, comes from 2017 and is a much different flavor than their first record. Whereas their first record was almost entirely constructed by samples, this one feels a little bit more integrated with original production. I know they kind of like shed a couple members of the group, or even just one. I know Darren Seltman was one of the guys. I think it was Darren, but Seltman was one of the guys that didn't make it to this record. Not really sure what the rationale was there, but I can imagine that if you were doing like the super sample heavy stuff in the early days and kind of branching out into having like guest vocalists, things like that, could be a much different idea of what you were used to when you joined the band. Like I said, I don't know anything. It's all speculation. Doesn't matter. Like I kind of alluded to just a second ago, this thing features a lot of guest vocalists, which is a huge departure from the first record. And I would say genre-wise, this one, whereas the first record I feel like is distinctly in sort of like that cut and paste house feel, this album is way more like hip-hop influenced, psychedelic indie pop influence. It's a really, really awesome record, and it features guests like MF Doom, Biz Markie, what else? Danny Brown. Oh my gosh, MF Doom and Danny Brown on the same track. It's really wild. Who else is on this? Tori Moa. Yeah, Tori Moa is one of the other big guests on this one. Just happens to be on black vinyl, standard edition. Nothing to write home about much there. But yeah, this is a really amazing follow-up. I like it quite a bit. I would say it's distinctly underrated amongst their discography, and even underrated in the year that it came out. It's a really amazing record, so definitely give it a shot. And this next one that I'm going to show you is the final Avalanches record that I have. But it is also worth your time, and it is yet an even bigger departure than their follow-up album, their follow-up sophomore album. This third album, We Will Always Love You, is, I would guess, kind of like a concept album about sending music into space, or having like this be the first point of contact for alien life. I really feel like this one is kind of like trying to be that like Golden Voyager record, or like some sort of modern version of it. There's something really cool about the album theming here that just like connects with me. It's very space age and out of this world, which is, again, a much different flavor than their first two records. Like their second record as well, this one features a lot more original instrumentation on top of the samples. But what's really cool is that this is a first pressing of the record on this like really ridiculous quad fold. You can see that they've got like the fancy discs, the fancy colored discs there. But yeah, this thing happens to be just on a pretty obnoxious jacket, which is pretty neat. This thing features a lot of guest vocalists. Everyone from, oh my gosh, I got to remember off the top of my head, like Rivers Cuomo, Sampa the Great, Denzel Curry, Cornelius is on this one, Jamie XX, Nina Kraviz. Yeah, this album features a lot of big names, and it has an extremely varied approach. So some stuff is kind of like synth pop, electro pop, house music, really like hip hop, a lot of fun stuff on this one. So like I said, I kind of feel like their concept was to go for like that first point of alien contact, and like as almost an introduction to what Earth is. So yeah, I really like this one a lot. Again, distinctly underrated amongst their discography. I really do feel like they live in the shadow of their first record. Kind of understandable considering that it is basically untouched as like a sample-heavy turntablism and plunderphonics record. It's really cool. All right, we are on to the B section of the electronic music, and I feel like I'm going to have a lot to say about most of these records, as I do with most records in my collection, but even more so than the country and folk section that we examined in the first couple episodes. Yeah, I have a lot to say about a lot of these records, because they're really like pivotal to me. They're very important. You know, that Avalanches stuff was really amazing. I remember my buddy introduced me to the Avalanches just after high school. Or maybe it was like in high school. I don't even know. I think I first heard it in high school, but I didn't really like get on board until my buddy was like, you gotta like sit down with this thing. So yeah, really good stuff. Loved that we could take a look at those ones today. And like I said, we are on to the Bs. And at the top of the Bs, this is an amazing album by Bibio. Bibio is an English music producer, a guy named, I think his name is Stephen Wilkinson. And his stuff kind of oscillates back and forth between electronic music influences and folk music influences. So there's a distinct, like almost electroacoustic feel in spite of, well, I think electroacoustic has a bit of a different connotation than just blatantly combining acoustic instrumentation and electronic instrumentation. I think the connotation there is more so to do with like experimental music and kind of process-based music. That would be my guess. But this is a great album. It combines a lot of different genres. You know, obviously there's that kind of back and forth between acoustic and electronic instrumentation, but this thing features a ton of different genres, from like kind of pastoral folk music to funk, hip hop, house music, like really, really amazing, beautiful textures. A lot of them originate from like guitars, but are like shifted and bent, and really, it's really amazing stuff. So if you've never heard of Bibio, 100% worth checking out. He also does vocals on many of these tracks, and his voice is very calming, very lovely, and it's a great compliment to all of the amazing electronic textures at play. I'm trying to think of like how I learned about Bibio. I'm assuming it was based on the look of this album art, as well as the fact that it's out on Warp Records. Warp Records, as far as electronic music goes, are one of the most reliable names out there. They have been putting out pretty forward-thinking stuff for decades at this point. Everything from Aphex Twin to, yeah, this Bibio record and well and beyond. There's a lot out there on Warp. There's a lot out in the world of electronic music. And that's what I love about electronic music, is that there's so much to offer in terms of like texture and approach and danceability. Some stuff is, yeah, purely made for like ruminating, thinking music. It's IDM, it's whatever. But then some stuff is really made for the dance floor, and I love that too. This one kind of occupies that sort of like perfect Sunday morning music. It's like that first thing you put on in the morning with your coffee. That's the vibe of Ambivalence Avenue. And I've got one more Bibio album to take a look at, and this one is perhaps an even stronger album. It's a follow-up. I feel like Steven and the Bibio project, like, they almost kind of they take turns. It's like back in, well, it's just one guy in one project, but still, like, what I'm saying is that it's not about it's not about consistency. It's just that for a big stretch in his discography, I feel like he was like going back and forth between albums that really connected with me and albums that were a little more tangential. So Ambivalence Avenue is amazing. The follow-up I think was only okay. And this album, which follows that one up, is like maybe his masterpiece. This is an album called Silver Wilkinson. And it is probably the most stunningly beautiful Bibio album out there. This one is, again, quite multi-genre. So it has a lot of electronic music textures, a lot of kind of natural guitar textures as well. There's fun, light pop songs in here, hip hop influenced stuff, house music influenced stuff. But a lot of it kind of comes back to those beautiful folk sounds that he's putting forth. He's got some really amazing stuff with like tape processing of guitars. I think for a lot of people, especially in his early discography, it reminded folks of like Boards of Canada, just like more of an IDM approach. But as he's kind of blossomed in his career, I think like the style and approach has become so much more refined. So as much as albums like Fee are like really interesting in their own right, it's albums like Silver Wilkinson that really show what this guy is capable of. And I mean, in the years since, there's been a lot of great albums. I think particularly about the two Phantom Brickworks collections. Those ones are beautiful, stunning, stunning albums. Highly recommended. I love Bibio. Really good stuff. Okay. I feel like I'm gonna have to drink a lot of water in this episode. I don't know. I gotta like slow down. We're not in a rush. We're here for an hour, folks. That's the best part about this program, is it's just like an uninterrupted block of me just hanging out. Hopefully no cuts. Really, the only reason I can think of doing cuts is maybe if there's like an inappropriate album art or something like that, which I think I actually ran into in the first episode as well with that Alejandro Escovedo record. So there was a sneaky sneaky censorship there on my part. As well as, yeah, like, oh yeah, I made a cut in the first video because I made like this disparaging joke that I didn't like. I was like, people don't need to see me cut into myself like that. They don't need to see me like, you know, yeah, be self-disparaging at all. So yeah, I cut that part out. But beyond that, yeah, we're going like uncut, unfiltered, all that fun stuff. So I hope that you're enjoying the show so far. These first 3 episodes, I'm having a blast with it, truly. We are on to another amazing name in kind of electronic music, and I say kind of electronic music because his career has really changed and evolved over the years too. This is the CMY, sorry, excuse me, the CMYK EP by James Blake. James Blake is a UK music producer, singer-songwriter who kind of burst out onto the scene with this really unique spin on like future garage, post dubstep, that sort of thing. And I mean, like, when he burst out onto the scene, I really mean like, from this, well, especially from this EP onwards, but a lot of his early singles too. I'm trying to think of what labels a lot of that stuff came out on, but it was a bunch of different ones. Obviously, his really early stuff was like big, big for a club moment. This one's really cool because the title track samples Aaliyah's. Um, uh, what's that song called from the Doctor Dolittle 2 soundtrack? Are you gonna love somebody? Are you gonna be somebody? That whatever that one's called. If I let you know. You can't tell nobody. I'm talking about nobody. Are you responsible? I love that one. So yeah, that's sampled all over this first track. And yeah, these are just some like four amazing kind of like highly textured, very off kilter, uh really like bass booming future garage tracks. So definitely check out James Blake. I'm a huge fan, and uh he'll be an interesting person to cover throughout the rest of this because yeah, he really transitioned to more of a singer-songwriter style later in his career, but then has since kind of come back to his electronic sound and tried to find commonality and middle ground between those things. It's tough. Okay, this next one is James Blake's Claverwork EP. This is yet another pre-full length EP from James Blake. This one focuses a lot more on the piano, so kind of like the first hint of his singer-songwriter side. This album is very ghostly, very not spooky necessarily, but it just has like a very ethereal and ghostly vibe to it. So highly recommended if you are into of course, yeah, like the singer-songwriter side of James Blake, and you kind of want to see where that side evolved from. Definitely check out Claverwork. This one is, yeah, very, it's not like ambient per se, but it's just very ethereal in its presentation. We are on to, I would say, like oh, okay, before we're on to that, actually, this is something a little bit different. You can see that it's got this kind of cool stamp there, but this is a white label 12-inch for Harmonimix. Harmonimix is a moniker of James Blake, and he used this Harmonimix pseudonym to explore like remixes of really interesting sounds. So there's everything from like Mala remixes, like some like true dubstep stuff, to these two tracks here. This is, like I said, a white label 12-inch, possibly unofficial, actually probably unofficial. Certainly, I don't think they cleared the rights to it. But the A side is A Milli by Lil Wayne, and the B side is Bills, Bills, Bills by Destiny's Child. I would say the Bills, Bills, Bills remix especially is really fun. It's great. The A Milli one is great too. I love that Lil Wayne song. It's pretty iconic. It was a huge moment back in the day, and I remember me and my buddies were just like all over that stuff when it came out. But yeah, like these remixes are very forward-thinking, very next level. The Bills, Bills, Bills one features just some really cool like pitch-shifted vocals and that sort of like those kind of droning synth leads that you would kind of come to expect from James Blake's sound just a little bit later on, particularly on his first full length, which I think we are finally going to discuss here. So when I said that James Blake burst out onto the scene, I was partly talking about his first singles and how they made a big impact in clubs in the UK. But really, I'm talking about his first full-length record. And I remember this one was like the darling of Pitchfork back in the day, got Best New Music. I remember Anthony Fantano. I remember Anthony Fantano not liking this record, but eventually he picked up the vinyl And because this thing features bonus tracks that aren't available on the digital version, and the fact that they happen to be integrated pretty fully into the record, not just tagged on at the end, made him turn it around, and that he actually loves this record. So kind of cool that it's been divisive, but also embraced by folks. And like I said, I think this one is fantastic. You've got a continuation of his kind of future garage sound. So when I say like the future garage post dubstep thing, I think what you can really expect is like big kind of like tremolo or oscillating like bass notes that really rumble your sound system, and you can feel in your chest. There's like lots of very kind of like two-steppy drums. It's really cool stuff. It's really cool stuff. I'm a big fan of, this particular album because, it kind of combined his singer-songwriter and his electronic tendencies in a more fluid way than I guess was explored on his previous EPs. But even then, like, this is still not him as like a songwriter's songwriter. This is him as like someone who's using words as like texture on top of his beats and productions. So I think this album, for everything that it offers, is my favorite James Blake album. It's amazing. Again, ethereal, ghostly, just amazing stuff. But it was followed up by this album here. It's an album called Overgrown. And I feel like this one more firmly positions him as a singer-songwriter. So this one features a lot more of, obviously he loves like the Prophet, the DSI Prophet series. It's a synthesizer. And you get like a full continuation of that sound, that sort of like warm analog keyboard sound on this one. But this one has like more like electric pianos and just like a warmer vibe all around. It's still chilly and cold, kind of like the album artwork here, but it is a lot warmer than his first full length. Overgrown is, like I said, singer-songwriter record. He's got some very beautiful vocal features on this thing. I'm trying to think if I can sing anything off the top of my head. I don't know. I'm blanking on lyrics, but time passes in the constant state. Can't sing that at all, but I love James Blake's voice. He's got that very like UK accented singer-songwriter voice, very formal sounding, like a choir, like a boys' choir or something like that. But just kind of beautiful. I love his voice so much. This album is really cool too, because if I'm not mistaken, it features Brian Eno on Digital Lion, which is cool. I think it's one of his best songs from a production standpoint. And having the Brian Eno feature on there is pretty legitimizing, is it not? I certainly think so. Okay, we are moving on. I have no idea what's next, but I just took a look, and we are on to... This was like my gateway into electronic music. This is Music Has the Right to Children by Boards of Canada. I will say my favorite Boards of Canada is actually their third record, The Campfire, or I guess it's their fourth record, technically. This is their second album. Twoism was their first. Music Has the Rights to Children, GeoGaddy, Campfire Head Phase, Tomorrow's Harvest. But Music Has the Rights to Children is a quintessential and iconic IDM album. So this thing features kind of like nostalgic sounding tape-drenched synthesizers and samples, a lot of like distant voices, and a lot of like kind of driving hip-hop inspired, but very much in the pocket of IDM beats. So this album has like this very ethereal undertone, but this very driving and beat-oriented sound that I think is just impeccably stylish. It's pretty timeless as well. This album came out in, I believe, like 1998, and it still sounds as fresh then as it does today. It's Yeah, it's really an amazing record because there are very few acts that can kind of like tap into this world. I think Bibio is like kind of in that same vein. And there's other like acts within early IDM that also can do that. But Boards of Canada just have a very like, there's something very magnetic about their approach. And I am so happy that I have this and my personal favorite of their record of theirs, Campfire Head Phase, in my collection. I don't have a complete collection of theirs. Obviously, the name of the show is Complete Collection, but I don't have full discographies of everyone. I've had to really like make choices as to like what I collect and what I don't collect. For instance, like James Blake. I've had a ton of James Blake records before, like way more than I have now, but I've actually cut back and pared back on that full collection, which is unfortunate in some ways, but at least I'm focusing on the things that I really love. Boards of Canada, like I said, this is one of my gateways into electronic music, thanks to the library. One thing I haven't talked about yet is that a big part of my music discovery in the past was thanks to the public library. I would go, my buddy Ricky and I, we would go like every day after high school and we would just browse CDs. And we would go through the CD collection and we'd browse through and find things that looked cool and we would take home stacks of records. Like I remember having stacks of CDs piled up on the floor, like, 45, 50 high stacks, not a single stack because that would be pretty precarious. But yeah, I remember having like huge stacks and then ripping them onto my computer and experiencing a lot of different music that way. And Boards of Canada were one of those discoveries. And I remember just being like mind melted when I first heard it because there was something so cool about the background textures they were using. They sounded so, nostalgic and unlike anything else. They were haunted and ghostly and distant, but like so nostalgic sounding. It's really the most remarkable thing. It sounds a lot like this album cover, to be honest. You can see that the album cover, there's a very ghostly appearance on these figures. And actually, what's cool, I made a TikTok about this, but this album cover was shot just like an hour from where I live. I'm in Calgary, Canada, and I'm really close to Banff, Canada. And this was shot at the Mount Norquay Lookout, probably way back in the day. The wall that they're sitting on is rebuilt, so it doesn't quite look the same as it did, but the view is still the same. And like the whole approach of that sort of lookout is the same. So I love having that local connection and I love being able to go up the mountain. And like, I remember I brought that album cover with me and it was so much fun. I loved it a bunch. Like I said, though, my favorite Boards of Canada record is the Campfire Head Phase. I don't know if too many people love this one or if it's a popular choice amongst their discography, but what's really interesting about this record is the guitar processing. So one thing that Boards of Canada did differently on this record is they centered much of their sound around guitars rather than synthesizers, ambient textures, voices, things like that, samples. This is way more like in the pocket. I keep saying in the pocket of. That's a weird one. That's a new one for me. That's something I never really said before. But I like it. It sounds good. This one has a much bigger hip-hop feel than other records. So this one, the beats are like down-tempo, hip-hop. The textures in the back are distinctly IDM. The guitar processing is unlike any other record. I have not heard guitars that quite sound like this one before, or these before, and they're always in the, they're in the pocket. No, they're, they're working in many different ways throughout the record. There's guitar leads. There's like guitar leads on like Chroma Key Dreamcoat, for instance. But then like Dave Van Cowboy uses like distorted, like layered distorted single tones to create like a really, I don't know, like, guitar leads, but there's also like droning electric stuff. There's, yeah, but then like everything's just been processed in such an interesting way. It's so tough to explain, but trust me when I say this record is beyond special and it's totally worth your time. Okay, we are continuing to go on. We are, I believe, like halfway through the show now, which is pretty cool. Still have a decent chunk of music to show you. This is an amazing down-tempo record. This is Black Sands by Bonobo. Bonobo is yet another UK music producer. Boards of Canada are from Scotland, by the way. So they're UK, but they're not like England, you know? Bonobo's another English music producer, and his stuff is very like down tempo, but albums like this are very string laden, and a big kind of like core foundational piece of Bonobo's music is that the background music of most of his beats, or within his beats, are built off of like very epic, how would you describe it? It's like a lot of acoustic stuff. So keyboards, synthesizers, pianos, strings. Strings are a huge part of it as well. So yeah, this is a beautiful, stunning record. I love this one a lot. It's a great vibe for, yeah, just like when you want to feel larger than life. It is kind of like this, it kind of looks like this album cover too. It's like a vista that seems really big. Like this is a very panoramic and widescreen sounding record. And I think that there's something really cool about the textures at play. Because yeah, you've got these naturalistic background textures with distinctly down tempo drums. But like the tempos are actually not like too low. Like they're adequate. They're driving, but I just kind of associate it more with that sort of like, yeah, down tempo feel. We got more B's. We got a lot of music in the B section today. I don't know what it is about record collections and the letter B. I don't know why, but I feel like that section is always bigger than anything else. This is a really amazing one here. This is Untrue by Burial. Burial is yet another English music producer who focuses mostly on sort of like or not post dubstep, but like dubstep. This is like a very, very brooding album. It's dark. It's so dark in its presentation. Uses samples really effectively, as well as like that two-step drum. Like I can't like imitate it, but once you know the drums, it just makes perfect sense. It's like it's got this kind of skittering feel, and it propels you forward constantly. But like I said, the underscore of this thing is extremely like dark and dour. It is like as gray as this album cover. It's distinctly like got a city feel, but it is so lonely in its presentation. It's like there might be, there's like things like Christina Aguilera samples on this thing, but they're pitched in such a way that they're so dark in their presentation. A big part of what makes Burial's music really interesting is that from the very beginning, he allegedly has not quantized his beats. Like, I'm pretty sure he enters them manually, like with finger drumming, and there's no quantization. So it really adds like a human feel to the beats. They're never perfect. They're never like fully locked into the grid, but they just like end up feeling very shuffly and naturalistic, that in a way that doesn't really come from electronic music. So I really like this record. It's a huge recommendation from my part. I think y'all will really like it. And we got more. We're out of the B's. After half an hour, we're out of the B's. This is an awesome record. Caribou's Swim. This record is beyond. It's so good. So Caribou is a Canadian combo breaker. We got a Canadian. Music producer, a guy named Dan Snaith. What's really cool is that Caribou is a solo project, but when they perform live, it is a full band. And it's one of the most remarkable live shows I've been to because these guys are like hopping from instrument to instrument. They're trading instruments. And it's just like it's just really cool, frankly speaking. I love it a lot. So this record is probably my favorite Caribou record. Again, like very naturalistic underscore elements. There's things like singing bowls on this. There's obviously synthesizer sounds, samples, stuff like that. But it's really cool because, yeah, this record just has a couple of really big bops on it. The opening track, Odessa, is just beyond. It is so, so good. You got this kind of like screaming sample in the back that just like commands your attention right off the bat. And then the vocals that Dan does are very like, they're very fun. Do 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 do. Like it's so simple, but it's really effective. And then I wanted to highlight bowls on this album as well, which uses the singing bowls, like as per the name states. And it is just like a purely blissful, extended electronic cut. I think it's like 6 minutes or something like that. And it just goes so many fun places. The beat is really driving. It makes me want to dance. And that is one of the best parts about Caribou's music. Now, I want to talk about the records in my collection, but I feel like I should talk a little bit about the discourse surrounding the latest Caribou record. We're going to do a bit of an aside here, but Caribou put out a record this past year, or I think in 2024, called Honey. And it is easily the most fun and danceable and like infectious sounding Caribou album ever. It is like such a dance floor filler. It is really, really cool and beyond. But one thing that is weird, and I mean, he could have just like not talked about this. He could have been deceitful, but he wanted to be upfront about it, I guess, or like stand in front of it. But all of the vocals on the record, all of the vocals are AI filtered to make him sound like other people and other things. So like most of the vocal features are Dan himself singing, but using the voice of like a woman, which is really interesting. So you hear femme vocals throughout the album, but it's all just Dan singing. There's even a rap verse on the album, and yeah, it's fully Dan rapping, and it's bad. It's really bad. It's the low point on the album, but the album's really good. But it gives me conflicted feelings listening to it because it's like the vocals, like, okay, here's my biggest thing is that there's so many varied vocal features on the album, and Caribou's already proven himself to work really well with like soul-oriented singers, folks like Jesse Lanza, for instance. And, he could have like employed some real people on this thing. Like, he could have used the album's budget not on AI music videos or AI vocal tech, but he could have paid real guest singers to come in and do it. And mind you, would he have been able to get the breadth and the variety of voices featured on the record if he hired real people? Probably not. But, it's really weird hearing him mask his voice into like very obvious touch points. Like you can pick out voices really easily. It's like, oh, that's him being Sade. Like that's okay, that's a Sade vocal sample, or it feels like a Sade vocal sample. Or like, oh wow, Billie Eilish is suddenly singing this verse. Like, wow, that's really cool. Or like or it's cool, but it's weird, It's so strange to me. But I wanted to bring that up because obviously there's a huge discussion about AI in music. And I think that the people have kind of spoken with this record, and most people seem to be uncomfortable with it. So an interesting experiment, and one that I feel like, yeah, it shouldn't have worked in the first place, but it's really good. And you know what is also really good. Like, really good. This is an album called The Man with the Movie Camera by Cinematic Orchestra. And this one, I guess maybe I should put it into the soundtracks section, but this is technically a soundtrack to a silent Soviet film called A Man with a Movie Camera, same title. And it is from, it's not Sergei Eisenstein, it is Disiga Vertov. And it is maybe one of my favorite movies of all time. It is so impressive with the practical effects, the in-camera edits, so many mind-bending things, like, you know, situations and visuals that you could really only imagine like with a computer nowadays, but in the service of, yeah, this like really mechanized, mechanical, urban, like city life film, silent film. Now, there's a couple different soundtracks to it. There's the, I think it's like the Metal Alloy Orchestra, I think they're called, or the Alloy Orchestra. That one's pretty good, but I would always recommend you watch it with this album here. It's the Cinematic Orchestra version. Cinematic Orchestra, like they're exactly what their name states. They have a highly cinematic sound, thanks due in part to things like lush string arrangements and really like larger than life underscores. But their music is distinctly down tempo. So you're going to expect a lot of like chill beats on their mainline albums, but here it's really interesting because they're obviously working to a like an hour-long feature film. And what's just like so cool about it is that they come up with these really complementary sounds that sound busy and mechanical and mechanized while also being extremely naturalistic in their presentation because, of course, like I said, it's all like string-based and orchestra-based underscores. It is remarkable. And it's funny because I was a huge fan of this album long before I saw the movie. I just listened to this one on its own. I thought it was my favorite cinematic orchestra record, like by and far. And it just turned out that it worked so much better with the movie. So if you're ever curious, like, yeah, check out Disiga Vertov's Soviet montage film, Man with the Movie Camera. It's remarkable. It's a phenomenal movie. And I would highly recommend, yeah, seeing it with this soundtrack because it's just like a perfect complement. It's great, but you can also listen to this thing on its own. And it really does hold up on its own as well. So easy recommendation. Good stuff. Get some more water here. We got a handful more records to show you. I feel like we'll get through most of these, but maybe not all of them. We are on to how do you even introduce like the most famous band in electronic music? This is Daft Punk. This is Random Access Memories, but you know, Mike and I also have we actually have that new Discovery, the pseudo-Japanese version. I say pseudo-Japanese version because while it looks like the original Japanese pressing, it was pressed in Germany and made in Germany. But it doesn't matter because that is an amazing sounding pressing. It actually blows my original copy of Discovery out of the water. Not an original pressing, but I think like the 2014 repress, which uses the same plates as the original. That's actually really interesting, is that there's only 3 unique versions of Discovery on vinyl. There's the Japanese press from 2001. There's the US and European press, which used the same plates from 2001. And they used those plates up until I think like as late as 2022 for like a regional press. And then they did the pseudo-Japanese version, which was pressed in Germany, and that has a different runout. So those 3 versions have different runouts, and I would say, based on my limited experience with both, The German Japanese press sounds way better than the 2014. That said, I've heard differing accounts. I've heard the 2001 sounds really good. I've heard the original Japanese, like the original one that was pressed in Japan, is probably the best sounding version, but that doesn't surprise me at all. Yeah. Okay, but we're not talking about discovery here. We're talking about random access memories. This is possibly my favorite Daft Punk record, which feels almost sacrilege to say, but I really do believe it is just a monumental achievement in recreating the sounds of the past. It is a disco album through and through, a really epic disco album at that. And it features like all of the, it features, you know, big names from the past as well. You've got folks like Giorgio Moroder on here. You've got Nile Rodgers on here. You've got Paul Williams is on this thing. Obviously not as disco, but like, yeah, really cool. And actually the Paul Williams cut is my favorite song on this thing, Touch. It is a really disco cut, but it is also so melodramatic. Touch, sweet touch. Dun, 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 dun. It's such a good melody. It just is like so, it sends shivers down my spine. It's so good. Like I'm literally feeling it right now. But there's so many modern guest vocalists on this thing. People like Pharrell, Julian Casablancas on, yeah, that's a great song. Panda Bear, I love the Panda Bear feature on this thing. Doing it right, everybody will be dancing and we're doing it right. Oh, I can't sing it. Doing it right, everybody will be dancing and we're doing it right. Everybody will be dancing and we're doing it right. Everybody will be dancing and we're doing it right. Everybody will be dancing and we're doing it right. Yeah. If you lose your way tonight, that's how you know the magic's right. I can't do it. I can't do it at all. I can do both harmonies, but I'm too scared to in this moment. I say as I try to sing it and brutalize it. But yeah, it's I love this record. There's so much positive to say about it. It's like an hour and a quarter of just like some of the most epic arrangements, lush recreations of, yeah, sounds from the past. And it's cool because it uses like a ton of live instrumentation. It uses studio musicians to really great effect. It is, yeah, like a complete experiment in recreating the sounds that inspire you. Whereas, you know, there's the French touch style stuff from Discovery and Homework. Ram is like, yeah, Ram is an exercise in recreation, and it just is like so successful to me. Okay, we got time for a few more here. This is another amazing musical discovery that I made way back in the day. Not from the library, mind you, this time. This one was I was researching a lot of like 90s Japanese music, the Shibuya Kei style sound. And, you know, it's really interesting because there's other artists from around the world that have kind of like tapped into the ethos of the Shibuya style. So it's like cut and paste, genre bending, really taking advantage of like import records and sounds from around the world. So this is one of those names that is not from Japan, but is really like kind of firmly implanted in that world. It's not like, you know, you wouldn't call this stuff Shibuya Kei, but it is distinctly like Shibuya style in its execution. This is Sacré Bleu. Sacré Bleu by French music producer Dimitri From Paris. This is his debut full-length album, an original pressing. I don't think they've ever repressed it. I am lucky that I found this for like $20 at a used store very early in my collecting journey. I can't believe I recognized this because my digital copy had different artwork than this one. Not sure what I was thinking, but it is just a spectacular showcase of house lounge, a little bit of disco, but mostly house and lounge music. And it's about like an hour. It's a really, really excellent listen. It's so chilled out. It's blissful. It's sophisticated, cosmopolitan, that sort of thing. I love it a lot. You should definitely give Dimitri from Paris a shot because he is one of my absolute favorite kind of genre fusion artists. And his DJ mixes are so bloody good. I think in particular about A Night at the Playboy Mansion, or even better, After the Playboy Mansion. There's 2 volumes of this After the Playboy Mansion series. I think it's like a laid back and an uplifting section. And those are just the best flow. Like, you could play one going to the club and one coming home from the club, and it would be a perfect complement, a perfect vibe. This is Dimitri from Paris's second full length. This one was way harder to track down, but I still managed to find a copy. This one's called Cruising Attitude, and you can see that it obviously has like this cool like flight plane theming to it. So yeah, this is a very like world weary sort of like cruising album. Not like cruising. You know what I mean. It's like Cruising Attitude. It's like you're cruising at altitude. You're like in the sky. You're flying. And this one's really fun because there's whereas the first album is a little more lounge inspired, and there's a lot of lounge on this one too. A lot of lounge, a lot of jazz. But what's really cool is there's 2 banging disco cuts on this thing. The first track in particular, I don't remember who it features. It's like Los Amigos Invisible. Los Amigos Invisible. And wow, the 2 of them just absolutely go ham on this like live feel disco cut that extends for I think like 7 minutes. And it is so hot. It is so flavorful. It just makes you want to boogie down. It's a lot of fun. And the rest of this album is really cool too. And it features some really interesting names as well. You've got Pink Martini, the kind of like jazzy little orchestra act, who are some of my favorites as well. I love Pink Martini. So you've got a cut from them on this thing, as well as a cut from Maki no Miya. He managed to get, here's where I was talking about the Shibuya Kei influence, because like it's obvious that Dimitri has been listening to the Japanese like Shibuya style stuff, because he went and literally got like the queen of Shibuya style, which is the vocalist for Pizzicato 5, Maki no Miya, on this thing. And, her vocal feature is amazing. I think it's a little bit out of place, just like the sudden Japanese, and it is a much different feel than the rest of the record. But I think it's so good. It's so good. And you know what else is so good? Disclosure. Oh, UK house music duo Disclosure. These guys broke out in I think like 2013 or something like that with the song Latch. Latch was a huge hit. It put Sam Smith on the map. Yeah, it's now I've got you in my space. I won't let go of you. Right through shock that been my embrace. I'm latching onto you. Yeah, it's so catchy. It's so fun. But yeah, the rest of this album just cooks. It is a really, really solid house music album. I think a lot of people would maybe like discredit this as being too poppy, or they would maybe like Latch was overplayed, for instance. But the rest of this album absolutely cooks. It is from the opening moments of When a Fire Starts to Burn, right down to this features some bonus tracks at the end of it. In particular, my favorite cut is like this mid-tempo number that features London Grammar. It's Help Me Lose My Mind. Help Me Lose My Mind. And it's so good. But there's like a lot of great features on this thing. I gotta read some of them off because I'm just not sure. Sam Smith, Aluna George, Sasha Keeble, and then my favorite, Jessie Ware is on this thing, like early Jessie Ware as well. But my favorite, another one of my favorites is You and Me featuring Eliza Doolittle. Eliza Doolittle is a English pop star. And yeah, that cut is really good. Talking about you and me, it'll be everything you ever dream. Possibly who and me. It could be everything, everything I'm meant to be. I can't really sing, but I try. It's never going to stop me from trying. I think this album is totally underrated, and it's highly worth a listen. If you haven't thought about checking it out since you heard Latch or whatever, Latch is overplayed, anything like that, it's definitely worth checking out this album again because it cooks. It really, really cooks. And Disclosure has had a bunch of really cool, successful projects since then. I think their follow-up album, Caracal, was a bit of a failure. They tried to go too pop, and they really like exited out of their house music sound to a certain extent. But yeah, the final album that we're going to look at today is this EP from Disclosure called Moonlight. And this is like Disclosure at their full potential. You've got really cool sample-based house music cuts on this thing that just totally bring the party. It's really the only shame is that it's too short, and that some of their full lengths just don't quite go as hard as this thing. Yeah, I have so many positive things to say about this record because, yeah, it just makes me want to move my feet. And that is one of my favorite parts about dance music in general, is that I am a terrible dancer, but I love to dance because it's just like one of the most impactful things you can do, moving your body in the rhythm of the beat. You got other people around. It's just so much fun. And that's it. Wait, let me see if I can do a better one. Okay. And that's it. Let me know in the comments below. What did you think of this episode of Complete Collection when I looked at my electronic music? I'd be so curious to know what you think. And thanks so much for tuning in. We'll have another episode of Complete Collection next month. Bye, everyone.